So you want to build out a long-term dividend portfolio and get it to the point to where the monthly dividends on average are outpacing all your bills, all your expenses, and then some. Because at this point, you'd be technically financially free and you would no longer necessarily need to depend on an active income source. Well, that's exactly been my goal over the past, say, 7 or 8 years, and as of right now, I'm currently earning around $6,800 per month in dividends if you were to average everything out. And of course, these are all just estimations. Now in this video, we're going to go over 5 of my favorite dividend-paying ETFs that I personally think are perfect to use either during retirement or to use to help pay for bills, and possibly at some point to completely use to live off dividends. Now all these ETFs are going to be offering a nice, decent starting dividend yield, but on top of that are going to be relatively safe. So if you want to see which of the 5 dividend-paying ETFs I think are perfect for investors that want to live off of dividends later on in the future, make sure to stick around, drop a like down below, and let's get right into the first ETF. Real quick, for those that haven't already, make sure to go to the first link in my description and grab my new dividend investing ebook, where I share exactly how I went from $0 invested to now earning over $6,000 on a monthly basis and over $1 million invested in the markets. Along with the ebook, you're also going to receive my custom dividend tracker, where you can track your dividend progress on an ongoing basis and reach your dividend investing goals. So make sure to grab yourself a copy of my dividend investing ebook and the new dividend tracker today. It's the first link in my description. Now, the first high yielding dividend paying ETF that I think is going to benefit me a lot, especially when I start living off of dividends, and I think could be a perfect addition to any of your portfolios if that's what you're looking for. I'm talking about SVOL, or the Simplified Volatility Premium ETF. Now this ETF has a very interesting strategy. It's sort of complicated, so definitely check out some of my other videos where I talk about SVOL on its own, and definitely look deeper into it before you buy it, of course. But SVOL could potentially be a great high-yielding ETF to live off of, or at least use some of the dividend income consistently for bills, because the ETF, at least over the last year, is basically trading sideways, which isn't necessarily great, but with that, this ETF offers a 15–16% dividend yield, which has paid consistently 30 to 31 cents every single month to investors consistently. Now, even though it's not ideal to see an investment trade sideways, you of course want to see things move up and to the right. If an investment is paying, let's say 15–16% as far as dividends per year, and even if you use half of those dividends for things like bills and reinvest the rest of those dividends back into more shares of SVOL to technically lower your cost basis. An ETF like this, at least up until the point to where we're looking at now, has had the potential to sustain someone if of course it's what they're trying to do. Now SVOL is currently in my portfolio as we speak, and I've been buying some shares of it ongoingly, although it's still a very small portion of my overall holdings. But if you're looking for some higher yielding investment vehicles and want to live off of dividends, definitely check out this one. Another high yielding ETF that I'm currently buying like crazy, that I'm definitely going to be using consistently when it comes time to live off of dividends later on in the future, I'm talking about SPYI, or the NEOS S&P 500 High Income ETF. Now this is an awesome cover call style ETF, more or less, that's only been around since August 2022, and it's up around 5.3% in the max time frame and up around 2.45% over the last year. Now naturally, because of the cover call overlay, I don't really expect SPYI to shoot up in price all that much, but that's not all that big of a deal to me because this ETF consistently has yielded around 10, 12, 14% historically. Going off of the last year or so, this ETF has paid a consistent 45 to 52 cent dividend every single month. Has a relatively cheap expense ratio for the nature of this holding, and I think is going to be a perfect holding later on when it comes time to where I want to use a lot of my dividends for things like bills. Now, if you would consider yourself more of an income investor, and if you're interested into things like QYLD, JEPB, or even JEPQ, I promise you, you are definitely going to want to look into SPYI, the NEOS S&P 500 High Income ETF. This ETF could be a perfect fit for you. And speaking of one of the JP Morgan products, JEPQ is one of my other favorite higher yielding ETFs that I've owned for several years now, and I'm most definitely going to hold through retirement and use those juicy dividends to pay for bills and other things. Now, JEPQ has been on a crazy run over the last year, up around 15.4% just as far as price return goes. Not to mention the expense ratio is very cheap at 0.35%. JEPQ, of course, does pay a dividend monthly. One of the downsides to JEPQ's dividend is it's not going to be the same every single month, and this is due to things like volatility and the management paying out a different amount, more or less. Although investors long term expect anywhere from around 35 to 45 cents, more or less, so you kind of have a gauge on what you're going to get paid by holding on to something like JEPQ. But I will say it's a little bit annoying, especially when you get into the point to where you're owning hundreds of shares, because you don't really know exactly what you're going to receive, and that could be potentially dangerous if you're going to be using an ETF like this to help pay for bills. But more or less, JetQ has proved that the strategy is pretty bulletproof. The dividends have kept on coming in consistently every single month since this ETF's inception, and this ETF is probably one of the gold standards if you're looking for income-oriented, income-generating ETFs across the entire market. One of my other favorite, more income-focused, higher-yielding ETFs right out the gate that also has the potential to make you some money on the back end as far as price return goes is Devo, or the Amplify CWP Enhanced Dividend ETF. Now, Devo is sort of a less talked about income-oriented ETF, which I honestly don't really know why. This ETF buys a small basket of holdings, sells covered calls in the basket, and generates a ton of income for investors. The ETF is up substantially over the past, say, 6 or 7 years, 60%, not to mention it's been paying around a 5% to investors ever since. Now, this ETF pays dividends monthly, so it's going to come in handy when it comes time for retirement, or when it comes time for me or you to use your dividends for things like bills, and I've owned Devo for several years now. I've been getting paid 14 or 15 cents every single month on time from Devo, but along with that, Devo just keeps moving up in price. Now, is Devo a massive buying opportunity as of today where it's trading at basically all-time highs? Maybe, maybe not, but Devo is definitely one that you for sure should have on your watch list. Look a little bit deeper into this one, because I promise you are going to like what this thing has to offer. The last higher yielding ETF that I think could potentially help a lot if you are trying to live off of dividends, use your dividend income to retire even potentially early, is a newer ETF, so we don't really have all that much data yet, but I'm talking about QQQI, the NEOS NASDAQ 100 High Income ETF. Now, we talked about SPYI a lot on my channel. I've made it very clear that I'm a huge fan of SPYI. I buy shares of SPYI every single day. Well, SPYI is also a NEOS ETF, but instead of tracking NASDAQ, SPYI tracks S&P. So yes, you guessed it, this ETF is very similar to that of SPYI, only it tracks NASDAQ. Now, this ETF has only been trading since the beginning of this year, but so far it's up around 5.43%. And has paid massive dividends every single month right out the gate, giving this ETF a trailing 12-month dividend yield of around 14, 15, 16%, which is massive. Now, across all my portfolios, I have to be honest, I only own maybe a handful or two of shares of QQQI as of right now, and that's just because I've been really focusing on building other positions. But later on, especially if this ETF keeps shaping up to be a good performer like it's been so far, this ETF could most likely become a larger position in my personal portfolio. We'll have to see. Either way, if you're looking for income generation, definitely check out this one added to your list. So there's 5 of my favorites, more income-focused, dividend-oriented, monthly paying dividend ETFs as of right now across the entire market. And like I said, every single one of those currently have a spot in my portfolio as we speak. Now, I understand that not every single one of those ETFs are going to be perfect for your portfolio or maybe the next person, but for investors that are looking to live off of dividends maybe a little bit sooner than others, those could be great additions to a portfolio long-term, at least in my humble opinion. But now lastly, most importantly, I want to hear from you guys down below. If you're trying to get to a point to where your dividends are going to outpace all your bills and then some, or potentially even retire, as of right now, speak it out there into existence. What age do you want to retire completely off dividend income? Let us know down below in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to please drop a like and subscribe for more future content like this. Thanks as always for stopping by, and if you are interested in investing, make sure to check out these recent videos I posted right here.